I'm back!
Yes, you are, Crash. And it never felt better. Well, here we are, folks. The end of Bandicoot Marathon. While I wouldn't say it's been the smoothest experience, I definitely enjoyed the time. And now it's time to wrap things up. And what better way to do that than with the game that this has been leading up to?
Whoa!
You know, I don't say this about many games, but man, I'm just happy that this exists. A brand new Crash Bandicoot game after 12 years? Heck yeah, I was excited. Crash has been through quite the time, with rushed games that either tried to return to the status quo or change up the formula altogether, kart racers failing to follow the success of CTR, beat-em-up games that gave the characters very unnecessary redesigns, and after all that, a 9-year-long hiatus. There was a time when Crash fans, myself included, lost hope that Crash wouldn't come back. It was a very depressing time, to be sure. And then, 2016 happened. Sony came out and announced that the original Crash trilogy was being remastered for the PS4, and a few months later, Activision revealed said remasters, or rather remakes, with the Crash Bandicoot N. Sane trilogy, which later released in June of 2017. And despite what Activision initially thought, this collection did incredibly well, selling over 10 million copies and being praised by platforming fans and Crash fans worldwide, and even being ported to the Xbox One, PC, and even the freaking Nintendo Switch. A former Sony exclusive on a Nintendo console? Heck, a portable Nintendo console? That's amazing! And just when we thought it couldn't get better, Activision announced at the 2018 Game Awards a remake of CTR, called Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, which released in June of 2019. And despite the inclusion of microtransactions pissing people off, for good reason, the game sold really well and was incredibly praised. Activision now has their Mario, and they realize this. So what was there to do next? Remake the last PS1 game? Remake the next mainline Crash game? Nope, bring us a new game altogether. With Toys for Bob, the same people behind the Spyro Reignited trilogy, as the lead developers, in October 2020, we got Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time. Because oh yeah, it sure is. So, for what's currently the most recent game I've looked at on this series, let's wrap up Bandicoot Marathon and take a look at the game that this has been building up to. Should note before we start, this is not a spoiler-free review. Just warning you now. No reason to delay this any further. Let's get the show on the road. The story opens up 20 years after the events of Crash 3. Cortex, Entropy, and Uka Uka are working on finding a way to escape their banishment. Well, Entropy and Uka Uka are. Cortex is playing with the Crash dummies. Eventually, Uka Uka does manage to open up a dimensional hole, causing him to pass out and allowing the two Mad Doctors to escape. Their escape allowed them to learn about the existence of a multiverse, and they develop a rift generator to open up more and conquer the universe, and enlist the aid of Engine and Embryo for assistance. How they were able to get Embryo to help them again is beyond me, but that's besides the point. Aku Aku notices this, and wakes Crash up in order to find out what's wrong. The new adventure of the Orange Marsupial takes him to Insanity Peak, where he discovers a strange new mask. This is a quantum mask, one of 4 masks that can control time and space. After discovering the rifts, Crash, Coco, Aku Aku, and the quantum mask Lonnie Loli go to explore new worlds, find the other quantum masks, and stop the Mad Doctor's plans. Now, I'm no stranger to dimension hopping myself, but what Crash and Coco go through is kinda ridiculous. Now, if this were part of the original trilogy, plus Wrath of Cortex, this would be where this story involvement comes to a near close. But this takes a page out of Twinsanity's book and gives us a bit more to work with. Still keeping the simple style, but giving us a bit more than just the intro. Along the journey, you encounter a retired Dingodile, an alternate universe version of Tawna, and even Dr. Cortex himself, since after you defeat him, Entropy turns on him, revealing that he has a new partner and a more evil plan with the Rift Generator. I will say, for the most part, this sort of story works. It's simple enough to not be a complete focus, but I like how there's more going on than just, there's a bad guy, he did a bad thing, you are the good guy, go stop him. There is one thing about the story in particular that bothers me though. As I mentioned, Entropy reveals that he found a new partner to work with. Who could this partner be? Is Embryo turning on Cortex? Does he partner up with Oxide? Does Entrance make his quote-unquote reboot debut? Nope, it's a female version of himself from the same universe as Tawna. Not only is she introduced out of the blue, but she also isn't relevant to the story for very long. She shows up, beats up Tawna, loses to the Bandicoots, and gets yeeted away. Not that I didn't mind her existence, and her design looks cool, but I feel she could have been handled better. And then there's the ending, and I'm going to give the last spoiler warning here. Okay, let's get into it. After the Entropy's defeat, the Quantum Masks send the playable characters to a food-centered futuristic city to rest until they get sent home. All the while, Cortex is planning his future. Throughout the game, Cortex shows that he's just about done with everything. Done being told what to do, done being double-crossed, and done constantly losing to Crash. His turn to the good side helps give him his big break, but by the end, Cortex travels back in time to stop his past self from creating Crash in the first place. Of course, Crash and Coco go to stop him, leading to some really funny interactions between Cortex's past and present self, one of which even references Crash's original species, capping off with a final boss that I'll cover later. But of course, being a Crash game, the story mostly takes a backseat compared to the gameplay, so let's get into that. Much like the previous entries, Crash 4 is a linear corridor-like 3D platformer, taking special inspiration from Crash 1 and 2 over 3. For better or worse. First and foremost, let's talk about Crash himself. For the most part, this is some of the best controls and physics Crash has ever had. His movement speed and jump arc work perfectly. The slide jump has much more hang time in the air, giving it a whole new purpose in the series, and the double jump being available at the start is very appreciated. Also, the indicator below Crash when he's in the air is something I'm very thankful to have. Not much more added to Crash's moveset, just stuff like rail grinding and wall running, the latter of which is kind of finicky, not gonna lie. Much like Crash 2, this game puts a heavy emphasis on the platforming, meaning that vehicle levels are very few and far between. And even then, it's just the jetboard and animal riding. The jetboard is alright, kinda sensitive in the controls, but not too bad. And the animal riding was one of my favorite extra mechanics in Crash 2, so I'm happy to see it back. There's no Puro though, just Polar and this new alien thing. They're mostly used for either chases or quick travel, making them kind of fun on a casual run. They also have these ridiculously small hitboxes, making it a total breeze to run past boxes or miss ones I probably should have hit. That's not a mechanic, that's just freaking annoying. You know what else is annoying? Their jump arcs. I kept missing this box specifically because Polar's jumping is incredibly inconsistent. I died 67 times on the level bears repeating so I can get this stupid box jump. This is one of the worst things I've ever done in a Crash game. Actually, I lied. There is another vehicle. They brought back the freaking Atmosphere. The best vehicle of Wrath of Cortex brought back. Heck yeah, this was such a shock. Granted, it's only used once early in the game in a chase sequence that lasts probably 3 minutes, but still, very happy that this is back. And of course, we gotta talk about the main gimmick of this game, the Quantum Masks. These are the new masks that help out Crash in certain circumstances. There's the aforementioned Lonnie Lowly, who allows you to phase objects and platforms between dimensions. Akano, who uses dark matter to give you an infinite spin that can shred metal crates and give you a bit of a hover. Kapunawa, who gives you the ability to slow time to a crawl. And Ika Ika, who allows you to flip gravity. I gotta say, I do wish these 4 were given more time to be fleshed out. Aside from Lonnie Lowly, we get 2 or 3 cutscenes total with them, which makes masks like Akano and Ika Ika kinda basic characters. I did enjoy Kapunawa's character though, and Lonnie Lowly seemed like a good pick for a mask to keep around for most of the game. As for their gameplay, I think Akano's probably my least favorite. Not to say mindlessly spinning around and wrecking everything isn't a lot of fun, but my issue is that even when not controlling the spin, you still move, making tight platforming kinda painful. There's a reason why the level dragging on was kinda monotonous. I mean, there's another reason, but we'll get to that. My favorite though is definitely Kapunawa. Not only is the time slowing very useful, but you can also use it to jump or run on nitro crates to delay their explosion. Take that, Sneak Shoes from Wrath of Cortex. Now all of these controls and mechanics aren't just for Crash. And with that, let's talk about the extra playable characters. Yep, this game takes a page out of Twinsanity's book in this regard too, but goes beyond with it. There are a total of 5 characters to play as. First and foremost, every level you play as Crash, you can also play as Coco. Much like Insane Trilogy, Coco controls exactly the same, right down to the abilities of the masks, but unlike Insane Trilogy, it doesn't matter if you're on a vehicle or anything like that. If you can play as Crash, you can play as Coco. I do like how Toys for Bob made it so Coco was more involved in the story. makes her feel more like she's helping out as opposed to helping out whenever she wanted. Next up, we got Tawna, and she is easily my favorite out of the extra characters. She has the same jump and double jump as Crash and Coco, as well as a roundhouse kick replacing the spin attack, a grapple hook that can be used to zoom to different areas and stun enemies, a wall jump that controls so much better than Crash's, and a ground pound that's super satisfying to pull off. Gonna be honest, I could play an entire standalone game with Tawna. Maybe not a full game, but something more along the lines of Uncharted The Lost Legacy or Spider-Man Miles Morales. Next up, there's Dingodile. And if you thought you'd be setting fire and spreading flames and causing chaos wherever you go, you can't. Remember, Dingodile's retired, so he no longer has his flamethrower rocket launcher combo in favor of Luigi's Poltergust. Yes, really. It can suck up Wumpa Fruit in boxes, grab TNT barrels and crates and launch them at enemies, and use it as a hover. Outside of that, all Dingodile's got is a tail sweep ability, and that's it. He's definitely fun to play, but at certain points his gameplay can get kind of monotonous, especially when you're replaying levels, but I'll go over that in a bit. And lastly, we got Cortex himself. Cortex's levels are more puzzle platforming levels than action platforming ones, using his ray gun to turn enemies into either stone platforms or jelly platforms that lets him bounce higher. He also has a dash ability to get across large gaps, even ending things off with a little flutter to make sure you land where you want. Very nice touch. I will say Cortex is probably my least favorite playable character in this game. The puzzle platformer element is kind of out of place in a Crash game. Not only that, but the ray gun is manually controlled, with no aim mechanic to speak of. Perfectly fine in 2D areas, which is how most of Cortex's playtime is, but in 3D areas it's kind of awkward. You unlock different timeline levels for each character after a mandatory level where you play as them. I've got quite a few thoughts on the timeline levels, but I'll get to those in a bit. Speaking of levels though, let's get into the main levels. First off, all the levels are organized in different dimensions, ranging from apocalyptic cities, reminding me very much of Megamix Mania from CTR, to a pirate mansion where the pirates are rats, yes really, to a space armada where Oxide resides, which as a side note, really nice to see him in a mainline game. That doesn't count. All the locales are very unique from each other, that's for sure. As for the levels themselves, for the most part, these are very fun. The main highlight, in my opinion, being Offbeat, with the visuals and soundtrack being top-notch, and the level structure is the most fair challenge in the game, both on a casual and 100% run. Plus with references to Spyro, CTR, and even Skylanders. That's amazing! The levels all in all are designed to put your abilities to the test, while still having quite a bit of fun challenge to them. Which on a side note, I keep hearing people say this game is hard. Well, yeah, the game's hard. Even on a casual run, this game loves throwing challenge at you at every turn. Your first time playing is going to be real rough, to be honest with you. But going for simply the main ending isn't too bad. It's hard, yes, but totally fair. But that's just on a casual run. There's an elephant in the room when it comes to reviews on this game. A full completion run. This game added a bunch of new things to collect in order to go for 100% completion. And to put it bluntly, I feel they completely overloaded the game with it. For starters, each level has 6 gems you need to collect. 3 for gaining a certain amount of Wumpa Fruit, 1 for breaking all the boxes, of course, 1 that's hidden somewhere in the level, and 1 for making it through the level without dying more than 3 times. The Wumpa Fruit gems aren't too bad, you'll most likely get all of them just going through the level. The hidden gems are usually pretty solid challenges, with the main exception of course being Run It By You. Seriously, how's anyone supposed to find that out? The 3 death gems are fine if you're just going through the level not worrying about the boxes, but the box gems? Woo boy! This is, by far, the most cruel a Crash game has ever been with its box placement. So many boxes left in places you would either breeze by, or you can't see and have to rely on indicators to get. How anyone thought this box in the level truck stopped was a good idea is beyond me. There are 38 levels in the game. And what's 38 times 6, you may ask? Oh, nothing much, just 228. 228 gems to painstakingly collect. And that's not all. Every level has both a regular and inverted version. Inverted mode is basically this game's version of a mirror mode, horizontally flipping the structure and slapping on a different art style for each dimension. For one, you could have echolocation-esque vision, or you could have it be in an old-timey movie with double the speed, just to name a couple examples. The only thing that's different for this mode is the art style and the location of the hidden gems. And this wouldn't be a problem if these weren't mandatory for 100%, meaning another 228 gems to collect. And that's not all. The colored gems also make their return, and holy crap, I hate these so much. For one, there's no indicator on which levels contain them, though if you want to know at least that much, red is in Insanity Peak, green is in Hit the Road, blue is in Dragon On, and yellow is in Run It By You. Now to be fair, red and yellow are fine enough. Red has a little hint at what you can do. Granted, it's a small, possibly unnoticeable hint, but still. And yellow is shown in the panning shot before the dart of run it by you. Green is kind of a stretch. Most likely you'll find this on accident or if you look up how to get it, but it is kind of a cute secret. The blue gem though? Nah, this thing is terrible. What you have to do is go through Dragon On without hitting a single box. Now I'm aware Crash 2 did the same thing, but here are the major differences. 1. The blue gem in Crash 2 is one you get at the beginning of the game, not near the middle. 2. Once again, Crash 2 told you that that level has a second gem before you entered it, whereas this game does not. And 3. Crash 2 didn't put that in a level with insanely tight platforming, tons of boxes, and with a quantum mask whose whole thing is shredding crates. And that's not all. Time trials also make their return, and to be blunt, didn't even try them for this video. And considering the things I heard about their difficulty in other reviews, I think that was a good idea. Doesn't help that they took a page out of CTR's book and added developer times. I didn't care for them in CTR, so naturally, I don't care for them here. And that's not all. Each level starting with Crash Compactor has a flashback tape, which while not hidden at all, is placed in random parts of the levels. How do you pick these up? You make it to the area they're at without dying once. Yep, they brought that crap back from Crash 1. And honestly, I think it should have stayed there. And that's not all. The flashback tapes give you new bonus levels to play, showing the trials and experiences Crash and Coco had to go through during Cortex's experimentations. That is an awesome idea. And you get a specific token at the end. Beating the level at all gives you Sapphire, breaking 90% of the boxes gives you Gold, and breaking all the boxes gives you Platinum. That is also an awesome idea. And these things are mandatory for 100% completion. That is a not so awesome idea. Doesn't help that these levels, they're freaking difficult, man. Granted, it's mostly worth it for Cortex's dialogue, but still, meh. And that's not all. Every level also has an insanely perfect relic, which is acquired by going through each level and getting all the gems without dying once. And with how hard this game can be, this is absolute torture. It ultimately makes it feel like padding, not helped at all by my issue with the timeline levels I mentioned before. See, while the mandatory levels with Tawna, Dingodile, and Cortex all require you to play as those characters for the entire level, the timeline levels cut off from the extra characters and go back to Crash and Coco. For example, the level Snow Way Out has an early situation where a ship you're about to cross explodes, and at the time, you have no idea why. Well, after that, there's a timeline level with Cortex called Ship Happens. Yes, really. And it shows why the ship exploded. And instead of continuing on with Cortex, you immediately cut back to Crash or Coco. And this wouldn't be a problem if the rest of the level was just Snow Way Out with slightly different box placements. This applies for every single timeline level, and it only just means that some levels are essentially going to be played at least 6 times, as opposed to at least 3. 1 for the regular gems, 1 for the inverted mode, and 1 for the time trials. I gave myself about 1 month, from October 2nd to November 1st. I would spend all my free time getting as much as I could, and I couldn't do it. I may have beaten the main game and saw the standard ending, but 100% completion just wasn't happening. And going forward, I might just resort to it being a side thing instead of a priority like before, which I was hoping not to do for a Crash game. Now that was a lot of negativity, wasn't it? Let's get back to the positives real quick. First off, before you start the game, you're given the option to choose between Retro Mode and Modern Mode, with which one you pick determining if you play the game with lives or not. Me personally, I think lives are an outdated mechanic, so you bet I stuck to Modern Mode for my playthrough, and I have zero intention of changing that. Secondly, while getting all the gems is very taxing, the things they unlock are very nice. Each level grants you a new skin if you collect enough gems, ranging from Crash's biker outfit from Warped, engine outfits, fake Crash and Coco, more on this later, and even the classic PS1 skins for the Bandicoots, once again taking a page out of CTR's book. What's even cooler is that these skins are actually rendered in the cutscenes, a detail Toys for Bob didn't have to do, but man am I glad they did. And just to clarify, since I know people are still paranoid over it, MTX are indeed completely absent. All the skins can only be unlocked with gems, nothing else. And lastly, before we move on, there's also a multiplayer option, as weird as that sounds. This is Bandicoot Battle, and there's 2 different game modes, Checkpoint Race and Crate Combo. Checkpoint Race is simple. You run through the level and make it to the checkpoint in the fastest time. Whoever has the fastest time gets a point, and whoever has the most points by the end wins. In crate combo, you have to smash as many crates as possible in a short amount of time until you get to the checkpoint. Whoever has the most points out of crates by the checkpoint wins the round, and whoever has the most round wins by the end wins the game. What's cool about this is that you can play this via pass and play, meaning you only need one controller. Also, each player is given a specific character to play as. Player 1 plays as Crash, Player 2 plays as Coco, Player 3 plays as Fake Crash, and Player 4 plays a debut character, Fake Coco. Cool they added something like that, and given they control exactly the same, it doesn't really matter who plays who. Alright, now let's get into the boss fights. There are 6 bosses in this game, 5 if you don't count a mini-boss, but details. And they range from alright to awesome. Boss 1 is Engine, who continues his tradition of having amazing boss fights. This time he controls a weapon of mass percussion, yes that's what it's called, which shoots energy at you. Green you have to jump over, and red you have to crouch under. Eventually you have to spin a tiny minion at the bot in order to stun it, which will leave it open to attack. Repeat the process 3 more times and you win. You also gain the help of Lonnie Loli in this fight, and the implementation of the quantum masks are going to be a recurring theme, let me tell you. Next up is a mini boss against a weird octopus fish thing named Luis. And this fight honestly isn't that great. While in the jet board, you have to direct these kamikaze rat pirates into Luis's tentacles, and when they explode, he takes damage, and you do this until the fight's over. I have 2 main issues with this fight. 1, I just don't think the jet board works for a boss fight, whether it's a mini boss or not. And 2, Luis can slam his tentacles down in order to try and kill you. The problem with that is that this can also take out the pirates with no harm or foul. So why is it that the pirates swimming into the tentacles hurts him, but him slamming them down on them doesn't? Makes no sense, honestly. Boss 2 is against Embryo, and to put it simply, this is more or less his fight from Crash 1. The only difference being the pink beakers have an area of effect to them now, and you can spin the green blobs. And when he's in Hulk mode, you have to use a Kano to knock him off the platform. And that's pretty much it. Kind of a meh fight, to be honest. Next up is Cortex, and this is what I'm talking about. While this is pretty much the same as the engine fight, as far as attacks are concerned anyway, the amount of chaos that ensues makes this fight feel different enough and still fun in its own right. Also, you use Kapunawa, not Lonnie Loli, which makes it better already.
Feel the wrath of Cortex!
What? But I already did. Look, I even made a video about it. Next up are the Entropies, and to be honest, this fight was kind of a letdown. Considering this line from the female Entropy,
"Let's see what you mongrels can do as a pack."
You'd think you'd be able to play as all the playable characters, but nope, it's just Crash or Coco. Now to be fair, the build up to this fight is very well done. A rail grinding segment where you get an extra surprise for getting all the fruit, not gonna spoil it here, please see it for yourself, and a very fun platforming challenge that implements all the quantum masks except for Ika Ika, who you use in the actual fight. But on the topic of the actual fight, all it is an obstacle course using gravity shifting to get by, and the entropies go down in 2 hits. I get the feeling you were supposed to play as the other characters with this short fight in mind, but it was cut due to time or something ironic. But still, I'm glad this isn't the final boss because wow, it would have been underwhelming. Speaking of the final boss though, it is, by tradition, Cortex. And this fight is fantastic. Cortex yoinks away the quantum masks from you and uses them to his favor now. All the while, turrets show up and try to kill you. Jump on these to destroy them, and Cortex will send out a lab assistant to do the job. And you need to spin them into Cortex in order to do damage. The idea of the quantum masks, who you've been using for the entire game, being used against you is awesome enough. But couple that with the added obstacles and the awesome soundtrack, and you have what I consider to be the best fight in the game. So the gameplay is overall really fun, but completion is absolute torture. But let's get into the presentation. Graphically, I mean, wow, this game is absolutely beautiful. All the environments are very nice looking, and the character models are as cartoony as ever. Special mention has to go to the cutscenes. Extremely well animated and showing off how fantastic these redesigns are. This Tana cutscene especially is just amazing. The amount of stretchy and expressive animations during these cutscenes are absolutely phenomenal. No exaggeration, I consider this to be the absolute best Crash has ever looked. He's amazing. As for technical stuff, I played on a base PS4, and on that the game runs at a simple 30 FPS, whereas on a PS4 Pro it runs at 60. I mentioned before that a game running at 30 FPS doesn't bother me, so naturally it doesn't here. And luckily, as far as I could tell, there was no noticeable frame drops, so that's a plus. That said, where the game lacks in frame drops, it makes up for slightly in glitches. I didn't get anything too major, but the one I did get was, interesting. You okay there, buddy? Anyway, the only major glitch I got that was kind of inconvenient was on the levels Jetboard Jetty and Run It By You, specifically Jetboard Jetty. For some reason, before I got to the final Jetboard segment, not counting the mini-boss, a box would just break off-screen for no apparent reason. This wouldn't be a problem if it didn't mess up my box counter. If this happens to you and you don't have all the boxes broken before the mini-boss, I'm really sorry to say, but you're screwed. But that's about all I got when it comes to glitches. Everything else ran as it should, and who knows, maybe they fixed it in one of the patches they uploaded while I was on the tail end of recording footage. And last up we got the audio, starting with the voice acting. Most of the voice actors from Insane Trilogy returned to reprise their role. Nope, I'm just kidding. It's just Lex Lang, Fred Tatasciore, Corey Burton, and Greg Eagles. Nope, not even Jess Harnell and Debbie Derryberry come back. The former we've been hearing since Tag Team Racing, and the latter we've been hearing since Wrath of Cortex. I imagine this is probably just a scheduling thing. After all, they are reprising their roles in the upcoming mobile game. But still, it is kind of jarring to not hear them in this. Luckily, Scott White and Eden Regal do a great job in their place, so it's not too bad. Lex Lang being as hilarious as Cortex as ever, and to be honest, I've always considered Greg Eagles to be my preferred voice for Aku Aku. He just always had more emotion and just gave an overall more natural performance that, You know, I didn't think a Crash game would make me feel sad, but here we are. Anyway, the weird thing is that while Corey Burton reprises his roles as Oxide and Engine, still miss Nolan North by the way, he does not reprise his role as Entropy, and I'm not entirely sure why. On the flip side, the voice actor they did get, JP Karliak, is my favorite voice for the character yet, so yeah. But the real shocker is with Embryo. Now, if I didn't know better, I'd probably just assume they got either Maurice LaMarche or Tom Kenny to reprise the role. But nope, they got Roger Craig Smith. Yes, that Roger Craig Smith. As for the Quantum Masks, we got Richard Horvitz as Lonnie Lully, Cheris Booth as Kapunawa, Zeno Robinson as the depressed Ika Ika, and Fred Tatasciore as the happy Ika Ika and Akano, all fitting their personalities well. What's weird is that voice actors like Edward Bosco, Keith Silverstein, and Yuri Lowenthal were credited in the credits, but with undisclosed roles. Most likely the cannon fodder enemies. And lastly, we got the soundtrack. Admittedly, not many of the tunes caught my attention while playing, but listening to them on their own, while I think a lot of the tracks played a bit too safe with riffs from the original trilogy, overall the soundtrack is very well done. Still prefer Wrath of Cortex in this regard though. But here's a taster of the tracks that caught my attention the most. And with that, we're finally wrapped up. So, I bet some of you are curious on my overall thoughts, considering the back and forth I had during this review. Well, overall, I do think this game is very good. The good soundtrack, great voice acting, fantastic visuals, and overall fun gameplay makes this a joy, and I do think this is a wonderful step in the right direction for Crash's future. But that said, I do think they need to tone it down on the amount of collectibles and the difficulty of getting them. Now, I have no issue with a difficult game, but as I mentioned before, some of the design choices can be more frustrating than a fun challenge. If it were up to me for the next game, I'd scrap the insanely perfect relics, either make inverted mode and flashback levels optional or remove them entirely, and keep the time trial relics to just Sapphire, Gold, and Platinum. Also, calm down with the hidden boxes. Those were ridiculous. But overall, I do love this game, and I really hope that this paves the way for future Crash games, because the more we can make up for lost time, the better. Overall, I'm not sure if I would say I prefer this game over Crash 3, but I would say I prefer it over 2 and 1 by quite a bit. That all said, while I do hope this allows for more Crash games in the future, I do hope the next project in this genre is Spyro's comeback. He needs it now more than ever. But with this game now in our lives, we can now finally say without hesitation, Crash is back. And it feels great. I'm going to be taking a small break for a bit to calm down with these reviews and get other things sorted for this channel. But when I come back, I think it's time we look at a smaller title. An indie title, if you will. I'll leave it at that. But for now, that's all I have to say. So thank you guys for watching, and I'll talk to you all in the next video. Bye everybody.